Save the Semantics, episode 356. It is December 15th, 2025. My name is Myro. This is the podcast where I ramble on for a bit about some shit. Recording this on a Monday afternoon / evening. It is halfway through December, a week and a half out from Christmas. It really does not feel like the holiday season, at least here, or maybe I just don't particularly feel it. I don't know exactly why, but yeah, it just doesn't feel that way. Maybe it's because we haven't put out the decorations yet. Well, I'll probably do that pretty soon, next week or this upcoming week. But yeah, it's been pretty quiet on that front, but yeah, it has been good. I got back from Japan last Thursday, or last Wednesday rather, and took a little bit of an adjustment period. Honestly, I felt more tired yesterday than I did earlier, from the earlier days than I got back. For some reason, I don't know why, but it just kind of hit me all of a sudden. I felt really tired. It's probably possible that I didn't sleep super well the night before, but whatever. It is what it is. So, a little jet lag, a little adjustment there. But now that I'm kind of back, quote unquote, back into the swing of things, I feel all right. I have some things that I want to talk about, some sort of big life updates, because that is going to be sort of the primary discussion point going into the future. But let's talk some hoops first, and then I'll get into that in a little bit. Let's talk Warriors. It has been quite the disappointing stretch. Don't really know what else to say. I think they're right about at 500 after their loss against Portland last night, which I just felt was coming. They just do. It is just a matchup. It's just a matchup issue, and it's very frustrating. Listening to our home broadcast with Bob Fitzgerald, Kalina Azubuike, when they're just perplexed. It's like, how does this keep happening? I don't know. Maybe because the teams that tend to beat us are ones that are larger than us. Looking at the Blazers here, they have long, athletic wings that are bigger than any of the 4-guard lineups that Steve Kerr runs out, running, Draymond at the center, having Jimmy at the power forward at 6'6". Like, this is a recipe for disaster when you're going up against these astronomically larger teams like the Blazers or the Rockets, right? And yeah, I mean, it was just like, it was like clockwork. Steph goes crazy. He goes for 48. It's incredible watching him play, but it is a shame that it comes at the cost of a game. You know what I mean? And I've said this before, and I love watching Steph play, but I care much more about the team's success than any individual success, right? And that's all that really kind of matters to me. I mean, obviously it's incredibly impressive to watch him do what he's able to do, but the fact that this has become a repeatable thing, this has become a just another iteration of what happened last year, except now, even with Jimmy, they just aren't able to help him out, is incredibly frustrating, right? because I was a lot more optimistic going into this season than I was last year, which I felt was reasonably so, considering the run that they made towards the end of last season after getting Jimmy, right? And I thought that success would translate coming into this year. It did, at least for the earlier part of the year. And then there were a few injuries here and there, stuff going out in and out of the lineup. And then just really bad losses, including this one, right? Losses to teams like Indiana or I don't know. I mean, Orlando's a good team, so I wouldn't even really call that a bad loss necessarily. But there's been some bad ones, right? And this is another one of them. They just can't beat these teams with length and size because of the configuration of this team, and also Steve Kerr's just fixation on running guards and just the size, the issue of size, right? This has been something that has been plaguing this team for a few seasons now after 22, and it just has never ever it's never been resolved fully, right? Even with having some size at the center position with Quentin Post, Trace Jackson-Davis, bringing in Al Horford, that is not enough to curb some of those the other lingering issues, especially on the perimeter, the lack of a consistent on ball point of attack defender, right? You just cannot rely on someone like Gary Payton II anymore. Moses Moody is not someone who has been consistent on that front. You could argue that he has shown some flashes here of being that 3-and-D guy, but he just has not done that on a consistent basis. Brandon Pajansky, it's just another someone else who is wildly inconsistent. He had a good game yesterday, but you cannot rely on him to do that again in a follow-up game. So it's just and I'm glad that they were able to bring in DeAnthony Melton, but it's a lot to expect someone who just came back after a year plus away from injury to immediately and meaningfully contribute in the rotation, right? So I don't know. And then Seth Curry has been a non-factor. I don't know why Will Richard has not been getting any playing time. He's been DMP alongside Kuminga. The Kuminga thing, whatever. Like, it seems like that everybody's just wanting to move past it, and then there's just another month of waiting around to finally be able to trade him. And with Will Richard now, I'm just like, it would be useful to have him in these situations where you need some wings and some size on the perimeter, even if he is someone who isn't even that big himself, right? So I don't know. It's kind of bleak right now. Maybe bleak is not the right word, but it's definitely not great. I think, you can fault the front office at times. I mean, this is just kind of a, I don't know if you can really even, like, who are you supposed to point the blame to? I think front office is maybe one of that, but I do think over the course of last year bringing in Jimmy, like, that was the right move. And I think over the summer it's a little, I don't know, maybe they could have done a little bit more, but I felt like they did okay with, just considering who was available. It wasn't a lot necessarily. I think they did okay. I just think that unfortunately it just hasn't come to fruition. The success of the early part of the season has not lasted, because of just teams have sort of started to figure out the Warriors. There's just a lot of issues when you're just having a Steph-centric offense. I think Jimmy's play has not been the best either. He has been good at some points, but also just kind of invisible at other times. So I don't know who you can like wholly put the blame on, because I feel like the front office has done okay. Obviously, we still need size. Like the construction is on their part for sure. You could probably put a lot of the blame pie to them. But also I think a lot of it goes to Steve Kerr as well, right? When you do have some of those players at your disposal and you're not playing them, Kuminga, I get it. I understand it is an issue of fit, but it was working earlier before his injury. And now it's kind of like, oh, he was injured. We're going to have to put him on ice to preserve his trade value and everything like that. And I get it. But also, we do need him. We need his size and his athleticism. And we're not going to get that because he's not going to play anymore. He is not going to play anymore. And that's a problem for this team that struggles and does not have size. So it's a I don't know. I feel like if these losses kind of continue to pile up, it's not looking really that great. Obviously, a move needs to be made at the trade deadline. It's going to happen. I just don't know what the package is going to look like. If they can get some type of deal with Kuminga included in the trade, who else can they bring back? Can they bring back, maybe some more wings, maybe some, some center depth? I'm not entirely sure. But I think it's just a tough situation all around. And I don't think nobody's really helping their case other than Steph doing his thing. He's trying his absolute best, and nobody else is really. It's just not a complimentary thing. It's just there's not enough, and it's just the size that's really the biggest thing, and it has been now for quite some time. So I don't know what else to really add to that. I was less frustrated last night and more just kind of throwing my hands up and kind of defeat in a way, because I don't know, this especially this loss where Steph had 48, 12 3-pointers made. It really feels as he's kind of it's the same thing of him dragging this team to some semblance of a potential win, which didn't happen, right? And maybe this is just it. Maybe this is kind of it. Maybe I think, a lot of people are putting, I think fair criticism onto the front office, but I do feel that they've done okay. I just don't, it just might not be it. I think this team just might not be it. And I think this is the end of the line. Maybe they can turn things around after they make a move, but it really feels kind of I don't know. I'm feeling kind of back to this feeling that I had last year, where there is just right now is where the team kind of is. I think you could argue earlier on they were maybe overshooting their win total or their expected placement in the West, and I don't know. You just look down the Western Conference. Every team that is kind of in the mix has something that the Warriors do not, right? Which is size. I know I keep talking about that, but it's true. Every team, from obviously the Thunder down to Utah, has size across the board on their roster. And even if some of those teams, like Portland or Utah, are not good teams, they are still a bad matchup for the Warriors, right? And there's just no solving that with the personnel that they have. So I'm feeling a little glum about it, about this team moving forward into the rest of this season. It's been frustrating because there was this kind of expectation. I feel that the age is also a factor as well. You look at the Clippers, they're having a lot of these same issues where they just cannot outwork some of these younger teams and younger players. And you get some of that too with the Warriors, with their age, right? And I just think that is not, you just can't work around that when it's a very tangible issue. And so I'm just kind of at a point where I don't want to accept it because it's still too early, but we're like a little over the quarter of the season, and I just don't really see a path moving forward with this roster at this point. So a change does need to happen by January, once Kuminga becomes trade eligible, which I think is the expectation of everybody at the organization. So until then, I guess tread water. I don't know. But you just got to do what you got to do, really, and kind of find a way to survive. I haven't looked at their schedule moving forward. I don't know how easier it's going to get, but to be honest, I don't even think it's really worth looking at to try to determine what the record's going to be, because they've played against some easier opponents and have floundered against them. So I just don't think it's worth having any expectation. I think just the desire is just to stay afloat, be kind of around 500, at least for the next month or so. So that's my wish. We'll see if I get that. Other than that, I will watch with some, I'm just going to enjoy what I can, because right now it's a bit rough. Anyways, so outside of the Warriors, there's been a lot of stuff going on in the NBA. You got the Cup final with the Spurs and the Knicks coming tomorrow. So I'll probably try to post this recording tonight so that this doesn't age poorly. So that should be a fun matchup. I don't really have too much to say about it. I don't know how much you can necessarily glean from a game that has no bearing on any records outside of, just bragging rights and some cash for the players. I mean, it's still a game. I'm not going to complain about that. But in terms of it being a reflection of who's actually going to do well in the playoffs or win the championship, it's not really a good indication of that. So, yeah, I guess I'm looking forward to it. It'll be fun, but no real expectations there. Other than that, there's been a lot of interesting trends. I haven't really talked a lot about specific teams or anything like that, because I haven't, since I've been out of the country, I haven't really had the chance to watch too many games. But one of the interesting ones that kind of popped up to me, because I was able to watch this game yesterday, or parts of this game yesterday, was Charlotte versus Cleveland. And I didn't realize that Cleveland was not doing so well. They are kind of towards the bottom of the Eastern Conference standings, at least on, in the playoff brackets. And they've had some kind of questionable moments here and there. And I think this loss in Charlotte raised a bit of a flag to me, where they didn't score at all in overtime. They scored 0 points, which is not good. And then, and they lost to Charlotte. And one of the things that is going to continue to be a lingering issue is Darius Garland's injury, but also now Evan Mobley is going to be out for likely a month or so, which isn't great considering how important he is to the team. And then you got Donovan Mitchell likely having to, kind of carry this team in a way, which I don't think is necessarily ideal. You know what I mean? I think that he was put in a similar situation in Utah when he was there, and it was him and Gobert kind of carrying that team. You had Gobert on the defensive end, and then you had, Mitchell on kind of the offensive end trying to kind of carry that team. And you're seeing kind of another iteration of that in Cleveland. And I think that's just not a recipe for success, especially in today's NBA. I just don't think you can have the type of success that you want to have when you have just a singular focus on a player. And you see that with Steph as well, trying to kind of carry his team to victory. It just doesn't work that way, right? The best teams in the league make a concerted effort and a very clear team effort in order to be a good team, right? It's not just a single offensive identity. I think what made Cleveland work so well last year was they had so many offensive threats, especially from three, whether it was Strus, Ty Jerome, Sam Merrill. Like, they had these kind of 3-point specialists that both Garland and Mitchell could kind of spray out to. And this year, a lot of those players are currently injured, and some other players are underperforming. Jared Allen, Evan Mobley hasn't exactly shown to be the best out, prior to his injury. You got DeAndre Hunter, who's on this cold streak, very reminiscent of his days in Atlanta, where he has moments where he looks like he could be a really good player, and then other times where he just looks like a bench scrub. And I just think that I don't know what it's going to look like for them, but they definitely do not look like the same team as they did last year, which I think it just spells like a potential end for this particular iteration of the Cavs, with Mitchell kind of being the leading man. They have come short in the playoffs year after year, starting with the New York series a few years ago, getting swept by the Celtics, losing last year to the Pacers. Sure, you could point to injury, but it still is not, I don't know. I just don't think you can really. It's a trend, right? And maybe there is a way to kind of get over that hump, but it just might be the fact that it's a kind of a similar thing with maybe the roster construction with the Warriors. It just might be the fact that the team is just not good enough, unfortunately. And maybe the fact that, even if you could have some key players out and stuff, but the good teams are able to kind of rise above it in some ways. They can have players that can replace some of that production. But if you're having inconsistencies up and down the roster and you're relying heavily on one player to kind of be that offensive hub, it just doesn't really spell success for you. And it feels as though this kind of era is drawing to a bit of a close here in Cleveland. I just don't see them. I think, there was expectations following last year that they were going to be one of the best teams in the East, which I think is a logical conclusion. But it just doesn't look great right now. And I think I just don't know that, other teams around them are getting better. You're looking at Detroit, Orlando, New York has kind of surpassed them at this point, right? It just feels kind of the end for them. And I'm curious to see what direction they decide to choose. They're still a good team, but they're just not good enough to be really competing at the highest level. And if they're not doing well in the regular season, I just don't know how well that, what that looks like in the postseason. If they're not having success against some of these weaker opponents, it just doesn't really give me a lot of confidence for them moving forward. So that's kind of, I know I'm talking kind of, I'm talking about the sort of the underperforming teams, but that has what's been sticking out to me as I've gotten back into watching basketball. There are a lot of surprises here, with the Spurs and everything like that. But the things that have sort of caught my attention, along with my Warriors struggling, is Cleveland and how they just haven't looked like the same team as they did last year. So that's kind of been something that just sort of I've been thinking about a little bit. This is going to go a little longer than I expected, but let's do it. So yeah, that's that on the basketball front. I finished playing Trails in the Sky this weekend. I beat the first game, or just the remake of the first game, and it was a blast. I loved it, right? I mean, it was probably one of my favorite games that I played this year. I don't know how much I can really say without getting into more spoilery stuff. But essentially the game ends on quite a cliffhanger, and it clearly sets up the sequel, the remake of the sequel, right? Essentially at the end, once you get past the credits, they show off a trailer for the second game, which I'm assuming will come out maybe in the next few years or so. Hopefully it's not going to take a super long time for it to come out. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting game in terms of the narrative, because, obviously this is kind of the introduction to the series. This is my first time playing a Trails game. It starts off in a kind of fairly typical JRPG format, in terms of, you start in a village and you kind of do some small things, and it eventually leads up to, the more climactic and more epic kind of ending where there's higher stakes and everything, right? But it feels that this was just such a blip in this world. This was such a small fraction of what this world contains, because for the most part, this game was, at least in terms of the tone and in terms of, again, the stakes and some of the themes that it presents, it's pretty light. It's a pretty lighthearted game for the most part, right? Of course, they touch on certain things of war and death, but it's never an explicit thing. A lot of it is shown. A lot of it are things that have happened previously, as opposed to that have happened presently within the game itself. So it's not until the ending where you get this much more of a darker side of the story. What I feel this is kind of akin to is Hunter x Hunter. Obviously, I think you get a little bit more of the darker tones and the darker themes maybe earlier on, I guess, in the Hunter arc. But that really kicks off I mean, that kind of really kicks off in York New, shit city. And with this game, I think you get that kind of indication of, oh, okay, I see there's a little bit more to it than just kind of this bright, lively world. There's kind of this there's this sinister undertone, which I really liked. I think that gave and I think looking back on the game, you can kind of think about, you think about some of the actions characters have taken and some of the implications of those actions and those kinds of things, that it sort of gives some of those earlier parts of the story a bit more, okay, there's something else to consider. It sort of, it doesn't completely change how you view the beginning of the game, but it does kind of, it's a little, it's different, it's a different kind of, you get a different perspective on it. And yeah, I thought it was good. I thought my only sort of complaint, I would say, or my only kind of issue that I have after I beat the game, was some of the pacing towards the end of the game, when they were when they were revealing those bigger moments, the bigger reveals. I felt the pacing in those moments felt a little slow, where some of the character reactions were a bit, not subdued, but a little, it was just kind of slow, because you're getting the realization and stuff, and when you're getting told these things, it's like, okay, I didn't realize this was kind of where, I mean, I expected a little, I expected something, right? Because just based on, I mean, this game has been out for, the original game has been out for quite some time, so I've heard some talk about there being a bit more, but it once you get kind of those reveals, it's not this like huge, I don't know, I mean it is a big reveal, but I thought the pacing for the particular scene where they do the reveal was, I don't know, I felt they could have tightened it up a little bit. There was some dialogue that, I don't know if it was really needed. It was just kind of giving some additional backstory on some stuff, and I was just like, okay, we can pick it up a little bit. And again, to be clear, this is the scene prior to the very ending of the game. This is where a particular character has kind of a bit of a dialogue and monologue of sorts. Not the main characters. That scene I felt was a little long in the tooth, but it's not that big of a deal. My other sort of criticism, I would say, is that I like Estelle and Joshua's relationship, but I also am not someone who's bought into it either. I like their pairing and stuff like that. I just don't particularly care for the direction that they went in, because it has never really, I think it has never really, I never fully bought into what their relationship eventually kind of developed into. It just felt, that the story needed it to go down that route, because of, just kind of where things were heading and what the eventual reveals kind of led to. So I wasn't the biggest fan of their, kind of relationship, if you want to call it that. But I do like the ending. I thought the ending was good. I thought it was touching. I can understand why people want to just rush into the next game, because it is a good cliffhanger. It's a really good cliffhanger. You want to kind of see what's next. It's a bit of a page turner, if you want to put it that way. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I like the ending quite a bit, despite some of my grievances with some of the elements. But overall, one of my favorite games that I've played this year. Maybe I'll talk about it a little bit more as we get closer to the end of the year, as I kind of do maybe my wrap up of the games that I've played this year, which was not as much as last year because of just, scheduling and timing and everything. But I'm excited to kind of look back on this, and I'm excited to delve into the rest of the Trail series. I don't know how, I'm going to wait for the, second chapter remake. I don't know when that's going to come out, but I'm excited to play that. And I'm willing to wait for that as well. I'm going to talk about the other stuff. I'm going to talk about, kind of the big move that I'm making, probably later this week. Just so I can kind of give myself that time. Because there's, a good amount of stuff to talk about along with the usual things. So I'm going to save that conversation for later this week in another recording. But for now, thanks for listening. As always, this has been Save the Semantics, signing off.